Welcome everybody to this workshop on transparent monitoring. This is about all the people working around mapping, deforestation mapping, cocoa mapping, all the work which is going on, particularly in Côte d'Ivoire and Ghana, but also around in other places of the African continent. It's great to have you all here. It's great that there is so much interest in this topic. And as we can see that there is a real need for open and transparent information. This is also the name of our project. So our project is called Transparent Monitoring. It's funded by the German Climate Fund, IKI. And our task is to really bring people together and to try as much as possible to make data open and monitoring as such open and transparent for everybody to understand what is going on, in particular with the new EU regulation on being able to trace supply chains. So the supply chain aspect is also a very important element of that. And with that, I don't want to lose too many words. My name is Steffen Fritz. I'm working at the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, which is just outside Vienna. And I have with me an excellent translator, Ethel Higonet, whom you know very well. Most of you know her, and she's going to try, in case you need to listen to this in French. There is also a translation button which you can then select, and you can then also, if needed, listen to this in French. Ethel kindly said that she would try to translate as much as possible, so thanks a lot for that. And we have also Natalie Worker with us from the National Wildlife Federation in the US Foundation, yeah. So she is also involved in this transparent monitoring project. And another person who has helped us preparing the workshop is Johannes Pirker. He also works on Côte d'Ivoire in particular, and on transparent and monitoring. And we have worked also quite a bit with the government and tried to get all these monitoring activities open and accessible to everybody. With that, I would like to start. Yeah, I also see some people from the JRC, Joint Research Center, the European Commission. So thanks a lot for joining us, and many of you who are going to present. We would proceed now with the presentations and just go through the presentations according to the agenda which we have. The first presentation, the very precise 2-minute presentation, is going to be given by Caroline Winchester. Do we have Caroline here? I don't see Caroline now in the...
I think that Caroline is going to be running late. So maybe we can bump her till later, and we could bump Niels up now because he's going to have to leave in 30 minutes. So we could rearrange the order a little bit. Can anyone also chime in right now if they need a simultaneous French translation? Is there anyone? If you don't need it, that's also fine. Okay. All right. So then we'll
you just write in the chat or lift your hands or say something if you need translation.
Perhaps ask that question in French.
Ah oui, si quelqu'un a besoin d'une traduction en français, dites-le moi et je peux vous expliquer comment faire.
Yes, thanks for that.
Bien noté.
Yes, Jean-Claude, maybe, could that be?
Yes, oui, yes.
Jean-Claude, je vais t'envoyer un message privé et tu vas voir comment ça marche, ok?
Ok, merci, thank you.
Okay, Ethel, so who will be next now? The first person who has to leave? You know better than me. Niels from Satelligence. Yes, the floor is yours, and please share the screen or just talk. Both is fine.
Sure.
Over to you, Niels. Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Stefan. Thanks, Ethel. Hi, everyone. Nice to be in touch. I'll keep it short. So Satelligence is working across geographies around the world, not only Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, but also Ecuador, Indonesia, and other places, and especially with the private sector. So the growers trader companies, Mondelez, Touton, Olam, you name them. And specifically, we work on mapping the distribution of cocoa, whether it is full sun cocoa or agroforestry cocoa, and deforestation. And the data sets that we use basically for the past 4 years, or 5 actually, Sentinel-1 radar, Sentinel-2, some JEDI data for height, as well as a lot of supply chain data, and mostly all the farm data that we use to train our algorithms, machine learning, come from the companies under NDA, non-disclosure agreement. But yeah, basically our aim is to understand better distribution of cocoa and also cocoa associated deforestation. How can we overlap cocoa distribution with what we know from deforestation? So yeah, data sets. Increasingly, we hope to use planet data as well. We'll talk about that later probably. Yeah, okay. That's, oh no, there's another thing which we're doing, which is work with Olam on the forest loss risk index work. So the FLRI work, which is not only mapping distribution and deforestation, but also tracking areas where deforestation is risk is very high as it relates to cooperation. So I think that's the whole story.
Okay, thanks very much for being so clear and brief. I would like to open up the floor for questions. So we want to really use this time also for discussions. If you have any questions to Niels, please just use the raise hand function. Or you can also just speak up. Since there is nobody just raising their hand, you can just speak up. Etel has a question, yes?
Niels, can you tell us anything about the cocoa mapping in Cameroon that Satelligence is doing?
Yes, we've been working with the IDH and WWF and government program over there, where we had been in touch with several of the companies also providing some of the ground data, not only the farms, but also on the canopy closure. I think actually the letter was by ICRAF, but one of the things we found there is that we wanted to have a better distinction of where cocoa was planted in degraded forest areas. And obviously the big challenge there was that a lot of the cocoa is actually under very dense canopy and super hard to map and monitor. It was a challenging program. At the moment, we are not working on that, but I see Violain is on the call. So for any future opportunities, probably she can tell a bit more about that. But I think in a nutshell, that's what we worked on in Cameroon.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. With that, are there any other questions to Niels? No more questions. Everything was very clear. I mean, maybe from my side, just one question for clarification. You know, we have a lot of kind of platforms, and there's a lot of mapping going on in different countries, managed by different companies such as yours. What is your kind of approach in terms of open data and open kind of platforms? Is this, it's a difficult question, I know, and but maybe you have an answer. Thank you.
At this moment, I don't have an answer. I think for us, it's what is most relevant is to know where the whole EU observatory, where that's going towards, and how we can fit in the whole ecosystem. Of course, we're very close to a lot of corporations, which I think in terms of service providers is relatively unique. Service providers, academics, that we're so close to quite a lot of corporates in the industry. So yeah, I don't know where things are moving towards. We're part of that.
Ruth, do you have a direct question to Niels? Then over to
you.
Yeah.
Just thanks, Niels. What's your relationship with the governments in Cameroon, and also in terms of any relationships direct with farmers groups, not just so other stakeholders basically than the companies?
Yeah, so we work together with most of the stakeholders, and obviously in Cameroon we had a rather close relationship, working directly together. I think the government stakeholder landscape in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire is kind of more fragmented from our side. So it's not always clear with what government we should work and what government department, right? And every department might have a preference for a specific group to work with. So that's kind of not so easy. So yeah, it depends on the country how close we are, but we are always open to work with all stakeholders. And actually in Ghana, we work a lot more with universities, University of Ghana and others. So,
Okay.
but through our partners like SNV and Solidaridad, we're also close to the government in some way, but maybe a bit further than we would want. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Yolan, you have a question though. The issue now I'm having is that I would really like to get through all the presentations and questions. Maybe you can keep this question if it's okay for later, because we will have later also a discussion. Or if it's an absolute burning question, you can ask.
It's okay. I'll put it in the chat because there were some questions actually on Cameroon, and I'm happy to provide additional insights into it. So I'll write this in the chat. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Yes, any additional questions you have, please do use the chat box. That's very useful. And please, those who have presented, do answer in the chat box. So check it out. Thanks a lot. Okay, I think the next person on the list next to after Caroline, who is I think not yet with us, is Jan Wegner. Is that okay? Over to you, Jan.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Stephen. So I will just quickly share my screen and show a few slides. Stay within the 2 minutes though. Okay, so I'm leading the EcoVision Lab at ETH Zurich and University of Zurich in Switzerland. And we are all computer scientists working on deep learning for environmental applications. One of them is cocoa mapping. And for this particular project in Ghana and Ivory Coast, we are combining full waveform JEDI LiDAR data. So this is this instrument on board the ISS that is scanning the globe continuously together with Sentinel-2 satellite imagery. And from the JEDI LiDAR, we predict the global canopy height and also above ground biomass and so on. And then we develop a deep learning pipeline to map cocoa, and this is shown in yellow here. And we then give this map to colleagues on the ground in Ghana and Ivory Coast, and they run around and they have validated a bit more than 10,000 hectares in both Ghana and Ivory Coast. And so the accuracy measures, not sure if you're used to that, but the F1 score is a good measure to measure accuracy in this case. And we're in the mid 80s there, so pretty happy with the results. So then outlooks on the right, top right, you see the canopy top height model that we are mapping. We actually have it globally, not only for those two countries. And now we're working on adapting the high carbon stock approach to this region together with Grant Roseman and Judy and so on. We're also building a rapid forest degradation alert system based on radar data. And then we will make everything publicly available as soon as we have written up all the technical stuff and the accuracy analysis as a scientific paper. So then there's a new project I just wanted to talk about. Oh, it's not new, but we start to get some results is, together with Lind, that we estimate the optimal shade tree cover per farm as such as to maximize the carbon stock per farm as at the same time with the yield. Okay, with this, I'm done, and thank you for listening.
Thanks a lot, Jan. Any questions to Jan? Ruth, is this an old hand up from yours, or is it a new one?
Well, it was an old one, but I'd really like to ask a question. So I was interested in the rapid forest degradation alert, and I think we might have been in contact through the work that I was involved with Paula McGregor, who's going to speak on Forest 2020. So we also worked in Kenya with the Kenya Forest Service, and they're developing a system with the University of Leicester that came under that project, which is specifically, on alerts, a forest alert system. So just to flag up that to you, and I'm sure there could be some really interesting cross learning with that project. Thank you. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much.
I have a question for Jan
Yes.
if there's time. Is your work connected with the work that's being done at the University of Maryland, who are also doing TandemX and JEDI LiDAR height maps?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we closely collaborate with Ralph Tobias and Ton Armstrong and Laura Duncanson on the JEDI calibration. So our first step was to develop a model that was calibrating the raw input JEDI LiDAR to predict the canopy top height. And we will do this for above ground biomass now too. So, but for this particular, for the COCO project, we don't. So that's a collaboration basically funded by Barry Callebaut in partially Berlin. And then there's more academic partners involved.
Thank you.
I have one question. This is my role in this project. You showed some really great maps, and I think it's really interesting. My understanding is that you make this at some point open, right? It's just about now to have it published first. Is that correct? My understanding?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, following our scientific approach, we want to write everything up to really make transparent where things do not work and are not accurate. And then once we have it written up, we will put it on archive, submit it to a journal. But once it's on archive, we publish the map.
Okay.
Such that you have both together always the map, and you also can read about how it's done and its limitations.
Yeah, that's really excellent. We are looking forward to that publication and the map. So thank you very much. Okay, we will go now due to time to the next person. Tara O'Shea, I think she's here, which is great.
Stefan?
Director of Forest
Stefan?
Program Planet.
Stefan?
Yes.
Stefan, we have somebody who's going to leave us pretty soon. Suzanne is going to have to go in about 10 minutes.
Sure.
Can we again just switch around the
sure.
time? I know this is for everybody who's been so kind about accommodating, coming even for a brief moment.
Yes.
We appreciate this, and for all the others,
Yes.
we appreciate your flexibility in letting the run of show change a little bit.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Maybe I ask you before next time, or I said that because you know better. So Suzanne Angliville from economist at Vivid Economics, specifically focusing on Côte d'Ivoire. So over to you, Suzanne.
Thanks so much, Stefan and Lizel. So hi everyone, I'm Suzanne Angliviel, economist at Vivid, where we've developed a tool called Image, which maps deforestation or tree cover loss in Côte d'Ivoire. So the tool was, we started working on it back in 2016, and first for a pilot region in the Southwest, and now it's been extended to cover the whole country. It produces tree cover loss alerts based on Sentinel-1 and 2 imagery, so they're updated about every 14 days on average. We work closely with the government through the Ministry of Planning and Development, and we also have relationships with other stakeholders who use the tool. Our next step for Image is to deepen our relationship with the Cocoa and Forest Initiative in the country and make some changes to the tool to make sure it's usable and answers the key needs of the CFI stakeholders in country. We're discussing this rather later today, so hopefully there will be updates soon. But the tool is running, available. It's not quite publicly available. You have to have an account, but the Ministry of Planning coordinates the creation of accounts, and anyone can request one. So I would invite you to do so if you're interested in seeing the tool in action. That's it from me. Hope that covered everything, but happy to take any questions, and any additional questions by email. I'm happy. Etel, I see your physical hand raised.
Thank you. Suzanne, can you put in the chat the email that people can write to ask for access then, and the link to the platform? Wonderful.
Yes, thanks for that. Any other questions before Suzanne has to leave? Any questions to the Vivid Image approach? Ruth, back to you again.
Very good. Yeah, just about any comments on sustainability. So, how's the platform going to be maintained, by the government, or by how's it going to run? That would be really interesting to know a little bit about.
Yeah, so the platform's running almost everything is automated on it, so it's running on its own, and the MPD is in charge of pressing the start button on the code when we need new alerts, and they've been doing that successfully for over a year now. They're also in charge of administrating the user accounts and have also been doing that successfully, and we're still there to answer any concerns or questions. Once the relationship with CFI is clarified, hopefully that will put a bit more certainty on the maintenance, contracting, and any additional projects. So one plan is once a countrywide land use map is produced by maybe with the EU projects for the EU Commission regulation, we would love, of course, to include that in IMAGE and update the system to be based on that baseline. So yeah, that's part of the plans, and hopefully through the CFI partnership, it can be done in a sustainable way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. Maybe just one more follow-up question from my side, if you don't mind. So we've heard that the project presented by Jan has an accuracy number in the 80s. Have you done any accuracy assessment of your map as well, Susan?
So yes, we've done accuracy assessments for the land use map. For the alert system, it was a bit trickier because we finished the development of the tool right as the lockdown was taking hold, so we couldn't go in country to do any checks. We're working on getting our partners to agree to sharing those reports that we do have on accuracy and field testing. Okay. So I'll keep you updated when that happens.
That would be great. That would be great. So please don't hesitate to ask Susanne further questions. She shared your email, so thanks a lot. And if you want access to also the platform, yeah, thanks. With that, if Etel allows me, I ask her first. We go to the next person, which would be Tara O'Shea she's director of the forest program from Planet. Over to Planet.
Awesome. Thank you, Stefan and Etel, for organizing this. It's a really great group and nice to see and meet many of you. As Stefan said, my name is Tara O'Shea. I lead forest and land use programs at Planet. I'll just give a quick kind of illustrative example here for those who do not know Planet. We are an aerospace and Earth observation data company. Let's see if my screen will load here. We own and operate the largest constellation of Earth observing satellites. We have about 150 or 200 satellites in space at any given time, but most of these satellites are really quite small. So what you see here is an illustrative example of the constellation. So Planet images the full Earth every day at about 3.5 meters per pixel and 8 spectral bands. We also own and operate the SkySat constellation, which can image at 50 centimeters per pixel. I'm just, in the interest of time, going to skip forward here. So really what Planet brings to the table that complements many of the public data sets that we have available is a new dimension of space and time. So it's a much higher spatial resolution at a much more frequent cadence. So I think many here have used our data perhaps in your own applications. But what I really try to emphasize is that spatial and temporal aspects. And as you can see here, just the what you can derive out of those insights. And I'm curious actually to talk a bit more about some of the biomass applications we discussed, but one program that I wanted to make sure people on this call are aware of is a data contract and program that we have with the government of Norway, which makes our high resolution data available across the tropics in order to help reduce and reverse tropical forest loss. So I think many of the projects that some of you are working on here would be eligible for this program, and it's available for sign up at planet.com/NICFI. I'll pause there, but happy to take a few questions. And sorry, I ran through some quick illustrative examples there.
Thanks very much, Tara. Any questions to Tara, to the Planet data?
This might be a hard one. I don't know, but with the NIC fee, how long is the NIC fee availability there for? And how is Planet going to be managing the process of transitioning away from that when it does end? And will the governments of the countries and the projects be able to put an opinion in on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the program, it was a 2-year contract with possibilities for 2 years of extension. So Norway has confirmed that it will run through 2023 for now, and there's another period of extension beyond that. So it is kind of difficult, I think, to think beyond that for right now, but it's guaranteed there through 2023 at this time, and a possibility for extension beyond that.
Thank you.
Etel has a question.
Yeah, Tara, I was going to ask you about Planet's ability to track the transition from monoculture to agroforestry, as more and more chocolate companies are sort of leaning in to try to re-green and decarbonize and feed their agroforestry plans into this new race to zero, which so many companies have signed up to. And then I guess in addition to measuring the perpetual growth as companies improve to more and more robust agroforestry, what about the sort of tragic converse of forest degradation, where it's not deforestation, but it's just thinning to plant cocoa under the canopy? How much do you think Planet data can be part of the solution to this degradation / agroforestry monitoring?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I do think sort of 2 of the high level use cases you just touched on there are where the higher spatial resolution really helps. One is on the detection and measurement of degradation. And we've seen that with the partnership with Norway. So many of the countries are improving their degradation early detection work with the access to the data, including the Central African Forest Initiative in the Congo Basin. All 6 of those countries are moving forward with degradation detection work. The other big area where we find that downstream of us, our users find the spatial resolution really helpful is on, well, there's a couple, but one is on classifying drivers of deforestation. So being able to detect the spatial signatures of some of the practices that you're discussing, whether that's, palm oil or whatever else might have a very clear spatial signature. Another area that we see a lot is biomass quantification, as we heard from the earlier speaker. So I'd say those are 3 areas where there can be big improvements with higher spatial resolutions. So I think the short answer is that yes, we can absolutely be a part of it. I don't think it's a silver bullet. This work all happens kind of downstream of us. So we don't do a lot of the analysis. We provide the higher resolution data that goes into the analysis. But yeah, it's just to say that I do think it's part of the ecosystem that can facilitate.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Tara. I mean, one thing we haven't really touched upon is that a lot of this work relies on ground data, and some of this ground data is collected by companies. And what we are increasingly finding is that the better the ground data and the more dense, the better the maps are also. So of course, higher resolution will for sure help, as you have indicated. But what matters a lot also is the reference data. And maybe we can have a separate discussion around that. Hopefully there will be a bit time for discussion afterward, and how maybe we can all try to find a way to more share this reference data, because we all have to rely on it, and maybe we can create a pre-competitive space for that. So we have some thoughts on this also from our side, but I don't want to take too much time now. So let's move to the next presentation. The next presentation is going to be given next person on the list. If there's nobody urgent, Etel? No, you are quiet. Okay. So Astrid Verhegen and Felix Rembold from the Joint Research Center are going to present their work. Over to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Stefan. Can you see my presentation?
We can, yes.
I'll try not to go through everything, to keep to the 2 minutes, but thank you for the invitation. Thank you for organizing. Anyway, I think the main objective here today is to know each other, know all the people working on this, and try to have the most collaborative like spirit and try to link up afterwards. At least that's what we want to insist on. So the GRC, the Joint Research Center, we are the Science and Knowledge Service of the European Commission. So we are giving scientific and technical support to some policy specific topics, and here the Sustainable Cocoa Initiative. So Felix and me, we are sitting in the food security unit, so more like agriculture topics, but we also have colleagues working on forest monitoring. So you probably know that the tropical moist forest product from our colleague Christelle Van Gutsem and Frédéric Achard that allow to monitor changes in the tropical forest. So our work in this specific contract is with DG INPA, so with Brussels, is really to give a support, technical support on some specific study on continuing to, knowing what is happening for mapping the cocoa plantation with satellite imagery and continue to improve collaboratively to support national initiative in Ghana or in Ivory Coast through request of the EU delegation, and use also some in-house knowledge we have, for example, in Europe from the Common Agricultural Policy on parcel registry, and see how this can also help to maybe advise the system that are being built in the country. So all this work is done in collaboration. I said DG INPA, GRC, the EU delegation, FE that will present after, FAO, GIZ, and we are really trying to be as most collaborative as possible. It just started, so we are maybe a little bit new in the field compared to other people that work on this for many years, but we would really like to link with most of you. So maybe I can go through very quickly, like what are specific activity we're planning for 2022. One is on support of Ivory Coast for a new reference land use map, and I know Carlos from EFI will present more detail later, but our contribution as GRC might be to activate a service, Copernicus GeoGlam service is called, and that will allow us to have field data collection and link with Sentinel-1, Sentinel-2. And I'm mentioning the field data collection because we are trying to, then it will be an opportunity to collect data in the ground, not like through the company's parcel, but like really thinking of EO, what's the best way to link field data with EO. And that would be really interesting for us to discuss if people already went a little bit further than just cocoa mapping, but like also different level of shade and what is possible and what's feasible and how to collect those data on the ground. And I'm finished on this. So we know there are maps from different initiatives that are presented today. We want to collaborate with that. We want to integrate what's already being done. There's been some previous work at the GRC. I know that Ito is not here today, but she was in another team and she did some preliminary work on mapping cocoa with Sentinel-1 and Sentinel-2. This was a first approach to it, showing that those data are really relevant for that. And we've been looking a bit also on how to improve this methodology using Polygon, using planet data. And this is part of our work, maybe not the core work, but it's really important for us to understand better what is possible to be done in order to advise at best the different partners of the project. And I will leave it to that. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Astrid. Astrid, any questions to Astrid?
What role does the JRC's work on cocoa mapping and deforestation have in informing sort of EU legislation and the new things that they're proposing around the environment bill for the EU? Does that have any relationship to what the GRC is doing?
So here, the project was really on the Sustainable Cocoa Initiative that came before the regulation. So of course there is a link, and I guess it will help feeding and help designing things for the company, but and the country. So we try really to support the countries on being more ready to inform on this. But I cannot speak too much because that's not my specialty, the regulation, and this is not directly like a preparation of the regulation. It's really on the Sustainable Cocoa Initiative that has been launched.
Okay.
I also have a question. if I may. So James just asked in the chat if you distinguish between cocoa, full sun cocoa and cocoa agroforestry, and a bit related to that is, do you track degradation versus deforestation, similar as you do in your tropical moist forest data set?
So on the cocoa part, the work that was done by a colleague, he was just mapping cocoa as such. What we would like to do with the new field campaign that will be done for like supporting this new reference map in Ivory Coast, we would like to see if we could discriminate better shaded and unshaded cocoa, and how to take that into account in the field. But we are not there yet. We are just like interested also to discuss if other people have more experience in the field.
Okay.
Is that answering your question?
Yeah, I think there's great research coming. We know. That's great. Thanks. Yeah, I think we have rushed a little bit with time now. So if there are some other questions, please put them in the chat, and maybe Astrid, you can then just answer them in the chat. Now we can move to the first presentation, which will be given by Caroline Winchester from Global Forest Watch. Over to you, Caroline.
Good morning. Great to be here today. I did not prepare any specific slides, but happy to talk through what we're doing and then pull up some slides as relevant. So the World Resources Institute, in collaboration with Climate Focus, the World Cocoa Foundation, and now the majority of CFI signatory cocoa and chocolate companies, is working to produce kind of, I think, two advances in monitoring to the cocoa sector in the West African landscape. So the first is that we have developed an aligned deforestation risk assessment that predicts where cocoa-driven deforestation is most likely to occur on an annual basis to help the industry and other stakeholders harmoniously identify those risky areas across West Africa and come together for harmonized collective action and collaboration for impact at scale. We currently have a draft map, and many of the other technology experts on this call have given their input into this method. And we will be publishing a final version of that this summer. So it's going through the WRI peer review process as we speak. And then will be published and widely accessible for download and use by anyone that wishes to benefit from this risk assessment. Excuse me. And then the second output that we are developing is we are collecting all the data that all of the companies have mapped on their cocoa plots and their supply chain. I'm happy to say we've gotten an aligned data sharing agreement signed by those that are participating, agreeing to do this, and the data is flowing in as we speak. So we will be creating a comprehensive data set of all the known mapped cocoa plots across West Africa. We will be using that to drive collective action amongst them. And then we are hoping to be able to use that to do research and development with folks like JRC and others to improve the cocoa extent maps that are out there as training data. On that point, though, I do want to put a caveat. We're going through quite an intensive ethics review internally at WRI right now on how we make sure we responsibly work with and steward that data set, because as I'm sure we all acknowledge and are aware, when you start mapping cocoa, you're mapping cocoa farmers. And so we need to be very thoughtful about how we're unveiling their potential locations and the potential unintended negative consequences to identifying farmers on a map in any way. So we are going through an intensive ethics review right now to determine how and if we can share that kind of plot level data set and in what format, et cetera. So that's underway, but yeah, that's what we're doing. So hoping this can all contribute to more accessible, transparent monitoring and collective action for impact at scale.
Thank you, Caroline. Questions? Since there are no questions, I might ask your questions. It's really interesting what you said about the ethics review and what you're looking at. Do you have any kind of examples, or what could be the negative consequences, like for farmers? What would be the caution to take, just to understand that part a bit more?
Sure. So I think from WRI's perspective, we don't want to facilitate unagreed resettlement of farmers. We view this as an ethical conundrum that needs to be very thoughtfully thought through. And so if you were to show the location of new farms or farmers, since they all live next door to their farms, the way that cocoa is grown, there is the possibility that they get removed from, for example, a protected area where it's not legal to produce cocoa. So this is a very tricky issue, right? On the one hand, you know, there's a balance between needing to reach deforestation free and not have expansion of protected areas, while also a balance of ensuring the actual people on the ground are being handled in a responsible, ethical way. And so for us, we're taking this very, very seriously and thinking through this as we think about how to make this data set more widely available and usable.
Thanks. Yeah, that's very insightful. Yeah.
Caroline, just sorry, just one thing. When will there be anything published about that ethics review once it's been completed?
Yeah, I would assume so. Yeah. So if we get the sign off to share it, there will be like very clear guidelines on how we steward this data set. So that would be transparent at that time. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I had a quick question. By the way, it's amazing work, Caroline, you're doing. Just amazing. Congratulations. And, you know, many of us in the world of environmental activism have long used the alert systems that Global Forest Watch has generated. And I was wondering if you could speak to whether there will also be alert systems that you're playing with and whether you will be using some of the alert systems that other entities are also working with, or seeding that space, or honing in on the ones that exist to deepen them for cocoa specifically, because it's so different, of course, from some of the alerts that we all use for palm oil and soy, where it's very, very large, you know, massive, easy to identify alerts. It's more like death by 1,000 cuts for cocoa. So I'd love your thoughts on alerts.
Sure. So at the moment, we surface a few different alert products. We actually have merged them together since then, because it gets quite confusing when there's many for our end user and audience. So we now have a combined alert layer that combines GLAD S2, and RAD or radar-based alerts to one. We currently have some GFW partners on the ground in West Africa actually testing out the alert products for cocoa monitoring. We have a group of cooperatives using this data. So I think we're going to get some good feedback there on, you know, the limitations and positives. And I think one of our hopes would be to actually take the existing alert products, see where there's missing gaps, where there are, fill them with other alert products. And also then go about a prioritized alert filter, because it's one thing to surface the millions of raw alerts that come out, another thing to kind of narrow it down. We get a lot of feedback from our users that the millions of alerts is overwhelming. We don't know how to handle that or respond in a useful way. So that's another actually use of this data set. We're hoping we can get approval, is to use that as, you know, when there are alerts very close to cocoa, maybe those are ones more worthwhile to check up on, for example. So using kind of a method behind the scenes to prioritize alerts for our end users to make them more actionable.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm sorry, I have to press on here a bit with time. We are going to go to the next presentation. I think this continues on the line along what the JRC is doing. Itohan Oza Abush is from the University of Würzburg. Over to you.
I don't think Ito could join us, but she did send us a presentation. Okay. So we could do one of two things. Along with everybody else's PowerPoints, we can put them all into a Dropbox and have them visible, or I can call it up and just pop through. What do you prefer, Stefan?
Hi, that's an option. I'm wondering if maybe Astrid or Felix want to quickly show it, or if not, maybe the easiest might just be to put it on the Dropbox as you suggest. That might be easier then.
Yeah. Astrid and Felix, I will share with you what Itohan gave us right now, and you can decide if you want to present it or if you want us to just put it in a Dropbox.
I mentioned her work on my last slide, knowing that she will not be here. So that was a bit alrighty with Felix, because he was not directly working with us. I think there is a paper also. I can send the PDF in the chat if people want to. And I think I would rather put it in the Dropbox, the presentation.
Okay. Excellent, thanks for that. Also, that saves us a bit of time, which is great. But as said, please ask for the presentation and also for the paper. There's a paper with it as well. Great. So then I would go to the next person. I hope these people are around from the land use governance experts, EU RED+ facility, Côte d'Ivoire. I don't know who is going to be presenting. There's a long list of authors. Yes.
Yeah, this is Carlos.
Presenting? Carlos. Yes. Over to you,
This is Carlos Reaño. Hello, everyone.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. I am here on the call with Valérie Révu. All right. Let me share this very fast, if I can. We have some slides, but not sure we can present. Yeah, share screen. Oh, the big green button. All right.
We see it perfectly.
Perfect.
Yeah, good. So we are from the European Forest Institute. We are supporting Côte d'Ivoire, Ghana, and Cameroon in setting some of the activities on the spatial monitoring. In the case of Côte d'Ivoire, we are supporting the monitor of cocoa and related deforestation. This is part of an initiative, the Sustainable Cocoa Initiative. In the case of Côte d'Ivoire, there is a budget that is coming directly to the Ivory State, and is technically assisted by GRC, so Astrid was presenting, as GIZ and FAO, and this is based on the country needs demand. In the case, as we say, in the case of Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire, there are two main outputs. One of the first one, I think, that is related to this meeting is the reference land use map for the period 2020-2021. And on top of that, something that was included by the government was to work in the specifications of the National Forest Monitoring Systems and other systems. So that's related to what we were discussing before. But that includes how to technically handle the multiple stakeholders' needs and how we can define the institutional arrangements. So clarifying that part. And the map, we expect to have a land use map that can at least be transparent, verifiable, accessible, aligned with international standards, and super important, replicable in the future. That's, in other words, it can be sustainable. And in the technical specifications, the idea that is based on existing methodologies, that could be a classification. So right now we propose that that we use the classification developed by FAO, it's a regional classification that they have for West Africa. Again, this is we follow the technical support, or we have the technical methodologies of GRC and other current initiatives. We already saw some of them here. Using Google Earth engines, simple online platforms, and something new, including machine learning to automate classifications and improve the uncertainties. So at this moment, there is the roadmap to achieve both outputs. That is under discussion with the Ivorian stakeholders under the leadership of the Prime Minister Office. And just for your, just to continue on this part, so in Ghana and Cameroon, we are doing a diagnosis of the available data, resources and capacities that exist in this case in Ghana, and we will do it soon on Cameroon, that exists in the country to produce and update a baseline of forest cover. When we say baseline, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a map, but something that can help to do a forest cover baseline of the forest cover to 31st December 2020, including cocoa production areas, forests, and relevant protected areas boundaries. So I expect maybe we can get, if I can get some good connection here today for Ghana and Cameroon. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Carlos. Maybe we can take one quick question to Carlos. Any questions? Sure. There are no questions, Carlos. Everything was pretty clear.
I have one actually, but more in the institutional context. So, Carlos, you mentioned in Côte d'Ivoire a committee for sustainable cocoa production. Does it exist already? And is that separate from the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, or is that integrated?
No, the sustainable cocoa initiative is a project from it's a EU funded project, right? And that's working directly with the government. That's let's say that's different from the cocoa forest initiative. But it was born on that part, right? So to support all those different initiatives. But it's a project from the EU.
Can I just say I really think it's unfortunate. I just WhatsApped George Ashapo, who we work with under the Forest 2020 project from the Kwame University of Science and Technology in Ghana. They, under the Forest 2020 project, basically have a national land use map, which is, produced in collaboration with the Forestry Commission. I really urge you to get in touch with these guys, because otherwise we're just simply reinventing the wheel 100 million times, and it's
exactly. And thank you for that. Yes, we have been contacting. So some of us, we are going on a mission to Ghana, and we already contacted the Forestry Commission, and Astrid already gave us the paper. So yes, we're also in contact with the University of Leicester, and I sent Ecometrica. I don't know if there is someone.
That's right. Paul is on this call, so
yes, exactly.
That's great.
Yeah,
fantastic.
right. Thank you.
Well done.
Okay, thank you so much. Sorry, I have to press you a bit again with time. Hopefully, we'll have some more time later for discussions. Any more questions? Just put them into the chat. With that, I think we now have somebody from the World Cocoa Foundation, Director of Environment, Etan Budiansky. Over to you. Is Etan around?
Yes, I am here. Over to me for what? I was not asked to speak. I'm happy to respond to anything.
Would you like
if you just want to say a few words about your work on mapping and what you guys have been doing for the last couple of years on mapping cocoa and deforestation.
Oh, okay. Sure. Would be happy to. Okay. What can I tell you guys about? So since the launch of the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, we've been really focused on working directly with the governments on putting in place satellite monitoring systems with deforestation alerts as part of the, and we've worked, Violen's on the call too, and she can easily speak to this stuff as well, because we've worked very closely with IDH throughout this whole process. The whole idea is the governments are responsible for their cocoa sector. It's their country, their farmers. The idea being that we want to support them in any way possible so that they can actively monitor deforestation, be able to report on progress, and ideally be able to more actively be addressing deforestation and degradation as it's taking place right now. It's very complicated. It is very much a technology issue, but it's also very much a political issue to getting these systems in place. And as a result, it has gone relatively slowly in both countries. I will tell you that in the case of Côte d'Ivoire, we've had the very good success of having the Ministry of Water and Forest, Minister of Eaux et Forêts, to adopt Vivid Economics Image as a satellite monitoring platform. This happened about a year ago. And what I should say is that this is through the Ministry of the MPD, Ministry of Planning and Development. But where the challenge is how do you move from adoption, which is we're adopted, to actual operation and implementation. And that's kind of where we're at in the phase right now. In the case of Ghana, there is still work to be done to officially put in place a satellite monitoring platform that is dedicated for the purposes of the Cocoa and Forest Initiative. Obviously, the work that Ecometrica is doing with the RMSC and the Forestry Commission is great, fantastic. We still struggle to make it to the next step where it's officially adopted for CFI, and that's effectively where we're at right now. One of the key questions that I was going to raise, but since I've got the microphone right now, is, there's been a bit of talk about the technology for developing deforestation alerts, but where we struggle and what I'd love to hear people talk about is what do you do with those alerts? What are those governance structures that you actually put in place to act upon the alerts? How do you determine who's supposed to be responsible? How are you supposed to act upon it? How you sift through the thousands, hundreds of thousands of alerts that come in all the time to make it more actionable on the ground to actively or proactively be addressing new deforestation. And then as the last word, the work with Global Forest Watch on development of the data set. I mean, this is revolutionary, as you guys can imagine. The fact that companies are eager, willing, proactive about sharing their polygon data for the purposes of developing collective action in a pre-competitive space. Guys, this is huge, and I cannot tell you how excited I am to look towards the last part of this year when we'll actually have this information along with the DRA, the aligned DRA, to actually be able to more precisely identify where we could be scaling up, building collaboration across companies directly with the government, where are those areas of the highest level of priority. And it's through this type of technology that's going to allow us to get there. Those are some quick few words. There you go.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ethan. That was very informative for all of us. And indeed, you pointed your finger at the right place, which is on action. And that is, of course, currently the big challenge to make things operational indeed. Any more follow-up questions? One quick follow-up question to Ethan? Or
I have one.
Yes.
Ethan, here today we talk about monitoring. Very closely linked to monitoring is traceability. Where do you guys stand with traceability, and where do you think what's the easier one, monitoring or traceability?
Wow. I mean, it's pretty exciting where traceability is headed right now. I mean, we put traceability as one of the most important components of our work on tackling deforestation, and you see it kind of front and center in the frameworks for action of the Cocoa and Forest Initiative. To on the one hand, companies work to achieve full traceability down to the farm level within their direct supply chains. At the same time, at the national level, establishing a traceability system that brings in both the traceable and the non-traceable cocoa, or if you want to call it direct and indirect, cocoa supply chains. Once again, to bring that all the way down to the farm level, and we've been working on that, for the past four plus years. Once again, very much a technology issue, also very much a political issue as well, and WCF, what we have done is really kind of set the standard and the criteria for what we believe to be the core components of achieving traceability, or how you define traceability down to the farm level, because companies, different players, organizations all have different ways of approaching it. But there are three main criteria that we focus on, that we are holding the companies accountable and other players accountable to. First off, that you are, whoever the entity is mapping every single plot of that farmer's farm, right? So we know that farmers, a farmer's farm tends to be made up of numerous plots, close together or potentially spread apart. The first part of achieving traceability is making sure that you're polygon mapping each of those plots. Second is associating each of those plots to a unique farmer ID. And then thirdly, to be actively actually monitoring the cocoa that you know, in the case of like a supplier that you're actively buying. So putting in place that criteria and making sure that the companies are living up to that is what we have been really focused on within WCF. Now, even broader than that, we are working directly with the companies, working with the government, and now, you know, it's obviously gone quite a bit larger with EU due diligence, which is great to hear, great to see. We are still focused on this within the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, but the idea being that we can work together through an aligned vision of where we want to be taking traceability. And WCF has very much taken the lead on helping to drive that, especially in the case of building the alignment and the collaboration across industry. So that's where we're at.
Thanks so much. I'm very sorry, I have to all push you now because we have more presentations that we've had in this 1 hour. So I'm very sorry, Caroline, but maybe you can put your questions in the chat and Ethan can answer it. That would be great. Sorry about that, but we have to really get through and give everybody a chance to present. So I will have to push you now a little bit more now. Jonas is around from the Cocoa IDH Global. Is Jonas around?
I think it's Violaine. I think it's going to be Violaine.
Yeah, absolutely. Jonas is not around, but I was to present a bit.
Okay, that's perfect. Yeah, please, over to you.
So, so I had mentioned actually to Johannes that I would rather present a user's perspective rather than focusing on CFI, and I think that Ethan did a great job in already explaining a bit so work that has been done through CFI. So I've got a few slides actually, and it's rather about the learning of a convener like IDH, learnings that we could actually collect from our role within CFI, but also a convening role in landscape approaches. So Stefan, don't hesitate to let me know if I'm taking too much time to present. But on CFI, so we're CFI, we're co-convening, co-facilitating CFI together with WCF. As part of CFI, the Cocoa and Forest Initiative, as many of you know, there's a core commitment related to monitoring of the commitment and to the adoption of a transparent satellite-based monitoring system. So this is what we've been working on, facilitating these discussions with the Ivorian government and with the companies as well. So I just wanted to highlight some of the learnings. So what was key actually in this process was the government ownership. And when I'm saying ownership, it's in terms not only of identifying the system, but using it. And it takes time actually for different persons in ministries and public institutions to understand how the tool also can be used, how it can be informs their work, etc. The challenge is in actually identifying a tool that is fit for purpose was that, well, in the discussions, as part of CFI, the actors that were part of the discussions were not all neutral because there's lots of players that had already invested in their own system, in different systems, and that had a stake into the selection, and it was really difficult to know exactly what system was best fit for CFI and for the government. What is also tricky is that technology is evolving really rapidly. So from one year to the others, and you've got new players, new systems that come into the pictures, and okay, you're like, what is it that should be chosen as this system to monitor deforestation? And of course, there's this balance between quality and cost. Okay, the more quality you want, the more accuracy you want, and the more costly it's going to be. And the key question always at the center of the picture is, who's going to pay for it ultimately? Who's going to pay for the system? And it's not just paying it at some point in time, but like there's also the maintenance of it, etc. So there's lots of questions behind that selection. And this is something that I think, Ethan just highlighted. So having a system is great, but this is just the first step. We need to understand what's behind the data, what is behind, what are the limitations of the data, because the satellite data don't tell everything. And the data also is not of value if it's not used for decision making. If it's just to publish a report that no one will use, it's going to be useless. So just like from CFI, these are really quickly, so I'm going through this very, very rapidly, but some of the learnings of convening the public sector, private sector over several years on this identification of a satellite first monitoring system. Then I also wanted to mention that these systems are useful for all of the initiatives that are called landscape initiatives, landscape approaches that are happening around the world. And here, this is just a map of the ones that we're convening. So there's 21 landscapes that we're convening across 12 countries. And for each of these countries, of course, we need to measure and monitor progress. So in a nutshell, these initiatives are about convening stakeholders at a local level for them to jointly commit to joint targets, an action plan, and co-design and co-implementation of projects related to more sustainable production, enhancement of livelihoods, and of course, first natural ecosystem protection and restoration. So for this, we need a satellite-based system to be able to monitor deforestation, forest degradation, forest restoration, farmland restoration, and lots of, the progress and what's happening on the ground. So as IDH, we're a convener of these initiatives, so bringing together the different stakeholders, and we need to help them also to identify such a system. And this is really tricky. In all of these countries where we are operating as a convener, what is tricky for us is that first, the system needs to be owned by the government. It needs to be recognized by the government. That's one. Then we need to ensure that the data is reliable, is accurate. So because if it's not accurate, not reliable, then the system won't be trusted, and then you lose your ability to make changes on the ground if the stakeholders don't trust the data. If you come to them and tell them, oh, this is where deforestation is happening, and they tell you, well, this is impossible because it's, I don't know, a river, in actual fact, then yeah, you lose totally the trust that they have in the system. Also, what's important is that, well, this system needs to inform decision making. So if your data is inaccurate, then there's a big risk that the decisions that you're making are going to have, a negative impact if they're ill-informed. Also, well, these systems are good when they
sorry,
have
we
also
are a bit short of
yes?
time. Sorry to interrupt you here. Maybe you can come to an end. Is it okay?
Yeah. So just wanted to mention then the last point is that the systems are just one part of the picture. It's only good if you relate it to what's happening on the ground. What you need, satellite-based systems are great, but you need also local data collection, you need surveillance, you need a lot of activities. So we're talking a lot about these technologies. Let's not forget about the users, how the systems can be used, should be used, etc. Because this is this is part of the same picture. So let's not forget about the users. And then I'm going to end here. But just wanted to provide this perspective as well, because I think this is what needs to also inform our discussions today. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. I would really want to get through this. So Ethan, if you could post a question to Violaine and she can answer in the chat box, that would be really excellent, because then we can move on to the next presentation. So the next presentation is going to be given by, I don't know how to spell this, to pronounce the name, Yinsa Traoré, National Office of Technical Studies and Development in Côte d'Ivoire. Insa?
So sorry, but I think Insa has sent a message by email that he could not attend.
Okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Well, that helps us, no worries. That's good for us. We have more time for discussion later then, and maybe some questions to Violaine we can then answer later. Okay, great. So San already has presented, which is great. With that, I want to hand over to Leo. Leo is here, I've seen him, Leo Botril, founder and director of Map Hubs. Over to you, Leo.
Hi, Stefan, how are you?
See you again as well.
Yeah, bit of a reunion here. Hello, I'm going to share my screen quickly. I'm not going to give a. Do you see the cocoa accountability map? Hopefully.
Yeah.
Okay. So hi, I'm Leo Bottrell. I'm the founder and director of Map Hubs. We're a technology company focused on building monitoring systems, particularly focused on deforestation. We've done a fair bit of work in cocoa, mostly with Mighty Earth, monitoring cocoa, particularly in CDI. And I think the challenge that we were sort of posing was how, I think this was launched back in 2020, but there was a lack of a public system for putting together both alert information and also supply chain information and cooperative locations onto one map. So what we basically developed here is an interactive map, and you can see it, there's two maps, which basically illustrates both the locations of co-ops, and I think this was the first publicly available map of co-op locations. And on the right, we have basically these hectares represent density of alerts. This is from the Vivid Economics images disturbance data set. So the darker the red, the more alerts were detected, and this is on a monthly basis. So you can basically interact with both the map and the cooperative locations and the alerts to identify where more alerts have happened. And this is very much a demonstration system of how we can bring both these two supply chain and alert data sets together onto one platform. And you can click through the different months. And then as you zoom in, you can see the hexes get smaller. And then as you get closer, you can actually see the alerts on the map. And then you also can query the database. So we have some supply chain information. So you can type for Mars to see whether Mars is sourcing from a particular co-op. And this is information provided by the companies to Mighty Earth and then added to the database. There's some other layers such as land classification map, which also is from Vivid Economics, and protected areas, which came from, I believe, the government as well. So I think this is very much a demonstration of what type of system can be developed, particularly if you're developing an open system for monitoring deforestation and supply chains. From my perspective, particularly, we do a lot of work in palm oil, where there's a lot more supply chain and traceability information available than there is in cocoa. I think definitely making more traceability information available publicly would be helpful, but I understand there's very serious ethical concerns about doing that. Also, I think there's been a lot of focus on alerts and disturbance information. I think this is very important, but at the same time, as I really do think encouraging companies to at least make their co-op data sets available. So having something along the lines of a co-op list for every company, both direct and indirect, I think would at least give us a window into who's buying from where. And that could be a good entry point for understanding the last or tier 3 relationship between plantations and cooperatives, which may be something handled on a private system, which is not publicly available. I'll leave it there, but any questions you have, please let me know. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Leo, and thanks for making the plea to make more of this data on the supply chain open. That's exactly in our spirit. Any questions, quick questions? I don't see Ruth, quick question.
I think that's an old hand for
okay.
Ruth.
Yeah, but I have got a question. So I mean,
that's great. That's great. Sorry, I didn't mean to go.
So where can we? Have you got? Can you share the the link to your? Yeah.
I'll put the web address in the chat.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Any more questions?
I believe Helen has to go very soon, so maybe we could just reorganize the order a tiny bit and have Helen from Trace go next.
Oh yes, perfect. Helen would have been the last, so she can be now the next. Helen, over to you from Trace, yeah?
Perfect. Tel, could you just share slide 5 from your screen? If I can't share, I'm afraid.
I will pull it up right away. Hang on. You get started and I'll get it.
Perfect. So yeah, I'm representing Trace here. I work at Trace, but our cocoa colleagues are in the field, so can't attend today. So Trace is a publicly available platform, and it uses publicly available data to map supply chains. In the case of cocoa, we started with Côte d'Ivoire, and we're moving into Ghana and Cameroon. The Côte d'Ivoire, if you go to slide 5, and I'll be quick. We're basically building on the cocoa accountability map and connecting export data. So this is per shipment data on exports based on customs declaration, and connecting that to the cocoa accountability map data on corporate disclosures in terms of which companies are buying from which cooperatives, and the list of tritons as well. What we're able to do is link, so some cooperatives export directly, so that's very easy to link back the volumes to the maps. In cases where they don't, the biggest issue is that there's no volume data at all. So we're having to model based on cooperative size and estimate what that volume of production is, and then link that to the export records. So in this first go, we're able to map 44% of exports back to the cooperatives and therefore those departments. But we can't map 24% of the supply because it's indirect, and then 30% we can't map because there's no disclosure by those exporters on any information whatsoever. So I think, yeah, that's, and then just finally, maybe from the discussions earlier, we're planning to link this then to the deforestation data. We were going to use the government data, but there was some discrepancies in it at the last minute. So we're now re-looking at what deforestation data we use, and do we use the Van Cutsem data or not. But I think, as Leo has said, based on publicly available data, you can get some insights, but really it's around the size of that indirect supply chain and the need for a greater disclosure, and particularly the gap in volumes, which makes it quite challenging as well. And that's the case for even certified flows as well, outside of bespoke sort of single origin chocolate. So I'll leave it there. We can also share this PowerPoint with this group afterwards, and any questions on methods and so on, please let me know. But yeah, really it's building on the work that Leo talked about and connecting that to the customs export data, which obviously is also a key data source that if it's not transparent, then we can't use it. So that's also a limitation of what years we can cover and which countries we can cover as well. The data is available on Tracer. You can also, if anyone's having any issues in accessing it, just ping me and I'll try and help.
Thanks a lot, Helen. Ethel, a question?
I was just going to say congratulations, Helen, for your incredible work, and ask you if when you guys have been doing traceability work for cocoa in Peru, Colombia, Brazil, Ivory Coast, and Ghana, if you've come across major different challenges, or if it's been similar challenges across the board, whether, you feel like you're closer to a breakthrough with certain geographies, or whether it's been horribly difficult in across all geographies, or.
It really depends. So I think in Brazil, the interesting thing is a lot of it is bought from West Africa, and then we exported because of tax benefits and rates. That's a whole other challenge. So the direct supply chain is better, and that will be an interesting question for the EU legislation. I think in Côte d'Ivoire, the big issue has been production and volume data has been a major challenge to link that to the cooperatives. That's been easier in Brazil, in Pará, where most of the coffee is grown. So I think similar challenges, but really, the main challenge is the transparency one and what is being made public versus what's available privately. And then, really that level of disclosure on volumes, which, we also see in other commodities as well, right? Like palm oil, as Leo said, there's much more bans, but still there's no volume data there from refineries to mills. So it's that same question of, without that volume data, it's very hard to publicly map these supply chains with any sort of high level of confidence.
Okay, thanks a lot. Yes, thanks for this very fascinating work you've been doing. I think you've been the first one to make this data really on supply chains public, and a lot of people are looking actually at your website to trace commodities. It's really excellent, yeah. And you're actually tracing it now. You're even in a supermarket, right? We can see people moving in the back. Yeah. So with that, we move to the next presentation. The next person here on the list would be Daniel Abu. Are you there, Daniel? Because I didn't see his name.
Yeah, Daniel from Troppenbos.
Might have Metrica as well. I think we're after Leo potentially.
Yes, I think Daniel from Troppenbos maybe isn't here, so we can just pop over to Ecometrica. And then I know that our Brazilian contingent has just joined. Pedro Ronca, of course, Maria's been here, but maybe we could have the Brazilians go next because I know Pedro's going to have to leave also fairly soon.
Sure. Okay, let's proceed like that. So now over to Econometrica. Maybe you want to quickly introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Paula, and it's really nice to meet you all and to be here. This is a great meeting. There's not been one of these for a while, and I found it so interesting, so thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
We see perfectly.
Cool, okay. So I'll keep it quite quick. So Ecometrica, we ran a project called Forest 2020 that was funded by the UK Space Agency. One of our partners in that project was the Ghana Forestry Commission, the Resource Management and Support Centre, which is the government agency that's responsible. Oh, sorry.
Can I just pause for 1 second? Stefan, can you let Helen back in? I'm sorry. She's had to rejoin by phone. Can you let her back in?
I wish I knew how to do that.
Okay, well, I'll shut up and let you go back to your presentation, Paula. I'm so sorry to have interrupted you for this logistical housekeeping matter.
No problem. I hope she gets back in.
I will ask, just continue.
Okay. So during the project, the Forestry Commission of Ghana and the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, their main challenge was that they wanted to be able to segregate shade-grown and monocrops-grown cocoa from natural forests, which quite a few people have spoken about on this call today. And the map on the screen is the output from their work. And there's an article about this that I think that Ruth has put into the chat, and this has a segregation of mono and shaded cocoa from natural forests, and they've accuracy assessed it, and they found that it was 90% accurate across the cocoa growing region at 10 meters resolution. So you can see the classification on here down in the southwest. And I guess apart from that's sort of the technical achievement of the project and being able to segregate shade and monocropped cocoa, but the second achievement that I wanted to bring up was around building a sustainability model in country, and I think it speaks to the points about implementation and operation. So this map is hosted on the Ecometrica platform, and it's being used by major cocoa traders and other institutions for other purposes, actually. It's looking at more commodities than just cocoa. And we have an agreement with the Forestry Commission essentially to enable them to have the funding in the future to update the map. So there's going to be an iteration of this map coming out in the next couple of months for 2021, which is last year. So that there will be the changes in the agroforestry and monocrop landscape for that. And aside from that, we are working also on expanding this technical capacity in West Africa as well, with a first focus on Nigeria, a country that hasn't been mentioned here yet today, I don't think, but we have a proposal in with UK Pact for the Kwame Nkrumah University to work with the government in Nigeria to expand this really sort of accurate agroforestry versus mono cocoa mapping method into the Nigerian Cross River state, with a view to scale up to some more states in the future. So that is a very brief summary of where we are, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but yeah, any questions, let me know.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we do have still a bit of time. I think there was a question by Ethan to Violin. So maybe you want to just reiterate your question, Ethan.
Sure. Yeah, I would love to, and I actually just wrote it in the chat, but I'm happy to explain it as well. And I don't want to pick on Violaine on this question, but she put up a slide specifically about what Violaine, 21 landscape projects across numerous commodities, across numerous geographies that IDH is leading, all with different varieties of satellite monitoring for their own purposes as part of these projects. And my question is, one of the big concerns that I have within CFI and just our overarching, monitoring and evaluation and learning framework is our ability to be aligned on definitions and criteria and methodologies, and in particular around satellite monitoring, around deforestation monitoring, being able to compare apples to apples. We have the challenge of being able to do that across Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, across different service providers. But this is a question for, I think, everybody. How do we move from all these different methodologies and criteria and definitions that all of you guys are using so that we can actually be more aligned on definitions? This is a question for everyone on the call right now, but Violaine, I brought this up because you mentioned that you had 21 different landscape projects within IDH. How do you guys do it when you're talking about different commodities and geographies and projects? Maybe to kick off that question.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. This is indeed something that's is a bit of a challenge, to be honest, because if it was just for IDH to report to our donors, then we would use one system across all of the geographies, and that would be it, right? And it would be simple. We could compare geographies, etc. But these forest monitoring systems are to inform decision making by government, civil society organizations, companies, etc. Hence, the system needs to be, and the data that is provided by the system needs to be recognized by the government, by the authorities. And so this is why we have an approach that is different from one country to another. An approach meaning there's a system that is different from one country to another because we need the data to be recognized. If we were to come with an external system and imposing this on the multi-stakeholder coalition that is formed, that is making jointly decisions, and that is also discussing about what's best for their landscapes, and it wouldn't work. It's not. So yeah, this is why it's a bit of a pragmatic approach, but I agree with you. In an ideal world, we would have really common definitions, an aligned way of monitoring deforestation. Also, forest degradation is something that we want to monitor across landscapes, restoration as well, etc.
Yeah, that's really a central question. Thanks a lot for bringing that up. So it means essentially you can't really standardize because there are different definitions recognized by the governments in different countries, and you are acknowledging that. Maybe still the question could be if there was a possibility to have two systems. One is more standardized system, and the other one is, acknowledging what is valid in the country. But yeah, that's maybe a separate discussion then. I want to jump back. Sorry for the jump now back to Violaine, but I think this was an important question. But let's go back to the presentation by Paula, which was just made. Any questions to Paula? Johannes has a question. And
yeah, I have one. I found the single most remarkable point in your map and your mapping effort, I think, is the discrimination between full sun cocoa and agroforestry cocoa. How did you manage that?
It's important to say that this map is produced by the Ghana Forestry Commission and the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. The work was funded by a project that Ecometrica ran, but the method belongs to them. And they did this by relying on, it was a combination of Sentinel-1 and 2. So there was, they sort of built their method using Sentinel-1 and 2, but then they used the Forestry Commission and their connection to the on-the-ground cocoa farms and their routine work in the area to make sure that there was really good quality field data collected. And I think that really underpinned a lot of the success of the method and how they were able to accuracy assess it. And they're kind of using that going forward. So I think in an operational, I guess the learn from it was from an operational point of view, it's going to be very difficult to achieve that kind of level of accuracy without relationships with institutions in country whose remit it is to be going out to the farms on a frequent basis. So yeah, that was how they did it, but there's a paper about it as well that we can share with you.
Thanks, Paula. Etel?
I'm just going to ask a super quick question, which is, what are your thoughts about layering supply chain information with the land use map in Ghana?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good point. It's something that we do privately for commodity traders who want to access this map. Right now, the map that I had shared on the screen with you is a sort of publicly available version of the map. And I guess the Forestry Commission in Ghana could probably do more with uploading more sort of, you know, freely available supply chain information onto the application so that you can see what's going on. But I think what we've found is with working with the companies that are sourcing, there's a lot of sensitivities around this, and it does come back to the ethics question as well as to how open do you make this kind of stuff. So yeah, we do it kind of privately for the companies if they want to use this to assess their supply chain. But yeah, there's this freely available version as well. So yeah, it's yeah, kind of mixed answer, I guess.
Oh, thanks a lot, Paula. If you have any more questions, please again use the chat box. With that, I think we can move to the next presentation. Is James around?
I think maybe we should have the Brazilians go next, just because some of the Brazilians may have to leave. Sorry.
Yes, no, that's fine. Please, Brazilians, come in, speak up. Over to you. Pedro, exactly. Pedro, over to you.
Yes. Hello. Hi, Stefan. Hi. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation, for being here. But maybe we should start with Marisa, right, Etel? Marisa, I think you should go first.
Marisa, and then
Yes.
Pedro, you can chime in to complete a little bit of what Marisa presents with how her mapping work fits into the bigger picture of Cocoa Action Brazil.
Exactly.
But please keep in mind, we have to get this done in 10 minutes, otherwise we don't have time for the next presentation, both of you, just for info. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I will be very quickly. I don't have really a presentation. I might show some slides, but we have so short time, then maybe I'll just say that Map Biomas Cacau is an initiative that started in 2019 and was funded at that time by Instituto Arapiaú. And we started with mapping cocoa, shaded cocoa in the Northeast Brazil in 6 counties, was around 6,000 kilometers territory. And we did this map. We got around 80% global accuracy for that map. We used at that time Sentinel-2 mostly, and also slope data, and Google Earth Engine platform. The scripts and the mapping is all freely available. And now with funding from World Cocoa Foundation and also the Brazilian, what the translation would be, what the Federal Prosecution, I think, Service from Bahia State, and also Instituto Arapiaú, which is an NGO. We are now expanding this map for South Bahia State, around 61,000 square kilometers area. And again, using Google Earth Engine platform and Sentinel-2, Sentinel-1, and Planet also images. And we are now in the process of improving this map and collecting more field data for its validation assessment. Maybe Pedro Ronca wants to say something else.
Sure, thank you, Marisa. Just to complement, I think it's very interesting because, as said in the previous presentation, we are also with a challenge to differentiate the native forest from the shaded Cabruca system. That's the traditional Bahia's shaded cocoa. And in many times this shade is very dense, so it's very challenging in the technical side, and Marisa knows much better than I. But it's very important for us in the management side to understand where cocoa starts and ends, and the forests where they link, because we also need to manage the shade on the cocoa shaded plantations, and the public prosecutors are not very happy to allow that to happen without being without knowing well the separation from the forest. So this will provide us important information for management and also for to bring back the productivity that is very low in many cases due to the dense shade. That's the current situation. And of course, this will enable, right, Marisa, the link between the data that MapBiomas has on deforestation that is very dense. So once this map is ready, we will be able to link it to the current alerts that MapBioma works for the whole country, also to identify deforestation happening in that region and where is it happening, and if it is happening, of course.
Great, thanks a lot. Questions? Etel has a question, I see.
I was going to ask two questions. So one is about coordinating the mapping of cocoa and deforestation between Brazil, but also Colombia, where there's the Iniciativa Cacao Bosques y Paz, and Ivory Coast and Ghana, and now the initiative in Cameroon as well. How is it possible to make sure that we have as much synergy as possible between all these different systems, and as little siloing and divergent definitions and methodologies as possible? Otherwise, many companies like Olam, Cargill, Bahikebu, Mondelez, Hershey's, Mars, that are spread across many geographies, I fear that if the systems between Indonesia and Cameroon and Ivory Coast and Ghana and Brazil and Colombia are very divergent, it'll be so hard for companies to comply properly. So what ways are there for there to be South-South collaboration and sharing of methodology and systems and expertise? And Brazil has got this incredible wealth. I mean, MapBiomas are so famous for doing incredible work on mapping deforestation. Is there any plan to share, to break through silos, to try to create these synergies?
Any comments, Marisa, from your side? Well,
Go ahead.
No, I could comment quickly. We do have some conversations. In fact, until last week, I was on a kind of similar workshop that was happening in Colombia. I joined virtually, but it was an exchange between tools on monitoring deforestation in Latin America. So there is the same talk happening in Latin America, but I would say that still in early stages. It was the first conversation I joined like that. But we are also supporting the exchange happening internally. For example, Global Forest Watch from WRI, that is a partner here in Brazil, and we know that some of the companies that are partners of Cocoa Action Brazil are also using Global Forest Watch in their own competitive agenda. And we supported, right, Marisa, the exchange of information between MapBiomas and WRI. This is happening in Brazil. So also for the two of them to improve in Brazil, but not so far outside, okay? But this is already happening. At least in Brazil, we are supporting this and looking also to Colombia and Peru on this exchange also, because they are, we have this 3-country exchange forum of what is happening.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Pedro. We should actually move on. I think there are 2 more presentations, if I'm not completely mistaken. So I think James was going to become ready to present, and then the last presentation would be Frank Bree from Earthworms. Is that correct, or is there somebody else, Etel?
I think that's correct.
Okay, okay, great. Let's see. Well, if somebody we forgot, please don't be shy and let us know. Is there anybody else beside James and Frank who will present, just that we have the overview? Please speak up if we forgot you. I apologize before. No? Okay, great. Okay, that's excellent. So we have two last presentations. Maybe we start with James, and then the last presentation will be Frank from Earthworm, right? Okay, over to you, James. Thanks.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to everybody for their very interesting presentations. Just as a word of introduction, I have been working as a freelance in various countries, so have looked at the efforts of UNDP in Ghana to address deforestation there under the CFI broader umbrella, also in Cameroon with EFI and IDH. And I'm currently, literally today, starting a new contract with the Central African Forest Initiative, which is trying to decide what to invest in, specifically in Cameroon, on the aspect of cocoa. And one of the challenges that keeps coming up is, what are we actually aiming for? Are we just trying to reduce the loss of forest, or reduce carbon emissions that are driven by cocoa expansion? And in the different countries I've worked, if you like, the stage in the process of deforestation is quite different. So in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, you've already lost a lot of the primary forest, and cocoa farmers are in secondary forests, whereas in Cameroon, cocoa is still expanding into what is very clearly either primary forest or very lightly degraded secondary forest. And the point that has been raised by various people about definitions is absolutely crucial to achieving one or the other goal. So you've got definitions of legal forest conversion or not legal. So it's not legal to deforest or degrade a permanent forest, i.e. in Cameroon, that means a state gazetted forest or a council forest. But it's perfectly okay to degrade a community forest because it's in the non-permanent forest domain. The problem is that, you know, if you see what farmers are doing, they're typically following loggers, which have started with a forest which might have 200 tons of carbon per hectare, and they degrade it to say a forest of 140 tons per hectare. And if a cocoa farmer follows and reduces the canopy from 140 to 70 tons per hectare, it's still classified as a forest. So it hasn't been deforested in inverted commas, but it's lost 70 tons of carbon, which is just the same effect from a climate change point of view as reducing a 70 ton per hectare high carbon stock forest in Ghana to an open sun forest, cocoa farm, I should say, plantation. So if we're looking at carbon emissions, it doesn't really matter where you start on that scale. It's a slippery slope towards zero, and the carbon emissions are the same no matter whether you start from high up, going halfway down, or from halfway down to zero. And I think that a lot of confusion exists around A, what are we trying to achieve, and B, how do you achieve it, and how do you monitor those things? And I think everybody understands and appreciates that it's much more difficult to monitor the early stages of degradation, where you're losing some of the carbon stock and biodiversity. By the way, a lot of it goes in that first degradation to 70. By the time you got to 70, most of the understory is gone, most of the biodiversity is gone. You're left with only useful species. So actually, from my point of view, stopping that first phase of degradation is probably the most important, because by the time you've got to 70 tons a hectare and you haven't dealt with how to, if you like, slow down that process, you're going to lose the other 70 anyway, trying to slow the oil tanker of cocoa expansion, which is what's happened in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire. And I, from my interactions with many stakeholders in Cameroon, have the impression that people have misunderstood what they're aiming for, and the definitions are not clear enough. The use of definitions like high carbon stock were not designed for cocoa at all. They're designed for final conversion from, say, a degraded forest to palm oil. Can you or can't you clear a 30, 40, 50, 70 tons of carbon per hectare forest to palm oil or not? But that doesn't work for, can you degrade a 140 ton per hectare carbon forest to a 71 and still call it an agroforest? So we've got to get a bit more clear on what the target is. If it's about climate change, I think we should all be very worried about that, but also biodiversity. That first phase of degradation is crucially important, and it doesn't really matter whether it's in a legally defined or legally protected forest or not. It still adds to carbon emissions. And where, you know, these systems are embedded in RED plans and you're going to pay countries for reduced emissions, you've got to talk about emissions and not just, oh, well, that forest is expendable and this one isn't. So I don't have the answers yet. We need the technology to be able to track these earlier stages of degradation. I've seen some very interesting at least trial runs with the Copernicus sets, the Sentinel data, showing those early stages of degradation more clearly than the sort of yes-no patterns. And the more that this sort of radar technology and so on can help us in tracking changes in forest density and biomass density or carbon stocks, the better. And I think that we have to also obviously not work just on cocoa farms, but on all farming systems across these landscapes, and the incentive has to be clearly put on maximizing or at least optimizing the sort of productivity per carbon loss in these landscapes. So there's a lot to do, and I'm still watching the technology and hoping that a solution will be affordable. As I totally agree with Violaine, you can't you know, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on monitoring on every landscape, but equally I think that the market should be able to pay it. The price of carbon has gone up enormously. You don't have to save that many tons of carbon to pay for carbon monitors or a sophisticated monitoring system to really monitor carbon under the fast rising carbon price. So I think we shouldn't exclude doing it just and sort of dumb down the ambition because we didn't have the technology, because the technology is getting cheaper and carbon's getting more expensive, and we'll very quickly be at a point where it is worth doing it, because otherwise we're kidding ourselves that we've actually addressing climate change. I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. That was very enlightening what you said, and I couldn't agree more. And I think it's also about getting governments to really understand that it's the carbon stock what matters and not the forest. And this will be a very important and not easy road to go, but it has to go that way. Otherwise, we're not progress.
Can I just make a point that I think it's really important? This is where several people have touched on it. It's not just about satellites and using satellites. We have to have the on-the-ground data. This is where it's a shame that Daniel Abu from Toppenbos wasn't here, because there is a lot of participatory monitoring going on in forest communities that should feed in to this system. And you know, I know James agrees, just didn't mention that, but I think this is so important. You know, that it has to be a joined up system, and it has to be contributions from all these different parties, from the government, from the private sector, but, you know, so importantly from communities, because they are the ones in the end that have so much incentive to maintain and to you know, be custodians of their resource.
So sorry.
Yes, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ruth, for that comment. For further questions or comments, please use the chat again, because we are running late otherwise. And I want to give Frank B still from Earthworm still the floor. So over to you. And yeah, maybe if you can do it in maximum three minutes, that would be absolutely brilliant, because then we have time for closure of this. But we are through. Thanks. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Steven. Hi, everybody. My name is Frank. I work for, Earthworm Foundation, and I'm based in Ivory Coast. So I'm going to take you through Starling. Starling is a satellite mapping, satellite-based tool that have been using by businesses and public administration, to put stop to deforestation in geographies. So in this, we have been developing cocoa landscape mapping. In Ghana, over Ghana and Ivory Coast, precisely under the 8th parallel where most of the cocoa areas are. So the main objective of this is to identify forest areas and also the other land uses like cocoa farms, rubber farms, and other land uses. So the type of data we use, to produce these land cover maps are high resolution satellite data, especially Spot 6 and 7, because this tool is being developed by our organization in partnership with Airbus Defense and Space. So in addition to this, we sometimes use Landsat 7, 8, and Sentinel-1 and 2 data as well, but with the combination of field data, because we think that field data are very important, to have a kind of very, very accurate maps. But specific sensor, for example, radar satellite images are sometimes used, for specific uses. At the end, we do a kind of exercise to, assess the accuracy of our maps, and all our maps have accuracy of, 80% of accuracy, more than that sometimes. But it is important to do this assessment so that we know at what point, at which point, our map reflects what is on the ground. So after we produce these land cover maps, we go to the monitoring phase. The monitoring phase where we try to track changes in the natural forest areas. So the idea is to determine exactly where changes are happening and help decision makers, to strengthen their processes. And also these tools is helping a lot businesses, to tackle deforestation in their supply chains, and also foster, smart decision making to halt deforestation and forest loss in these areas. The use case I'm going to present is the one around Cavalier Forest. Cavalier Forest is in Ivory Coast. So Cavalier Forest is one of these well-protected forest reserve in Ivory Coast. So the government is really concerned about its protection. So in 2017, we have been partnering with the government of Cote d'Ivoire, to protect this forest. So Starling tool was, has been piloted there. So from this pilot, the government, through the SODEFOR, decided, to launch the monitoring phase, which we started since 2018. So 4 years we have started this, and the monitoring information we gathered within these 4 years show that from Q1 2018 to Q4 2021, the deforestation trend has drastically decreased, because the data we share with SODEFOR and people on the ground, to really help them, target the right areas where to go and do a field patrol. So all these reliable and with good quality data that we share with the institution, help the institution, today to drastically reduce the pressure on this forest. So as you can see on the graph, it clearly showed from 1,400 quarter 1 2028
Very sorry, Frank, I have to stop you because we're running out of time. We're 1 minute left only. Could you come to an end, please?
Okay, thank you. So, what I will say to end this is that in addition to forest loss monitoring, we also monitor, the natural regrowth. So, in these areas, because it is important to assess what is growing naturally, even if some replanting activities are taking place. But it is also good to have an eye on the regrowth aspect. Thank you. That's all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Frank. For those who can stay and don't have another meeting now for the full hour, you can still stay with us. We can maybe extend a little bit, so maybe we can have a discussion if you have to leave. Thanks a lot for participating. This was just the start of a conversation we will have in the future. And thanks everybody so much for having contributed so much wealth of information on monitoring systems and on other insights. Also, the importance on the ground knowledge is really critical. So thanks for making all those points. So if you have to leave, feel free to leave. If you want to stay a bit longer, you're very welcome. If we can maybe go over another like 5 to 10 minutes. If there are some outstanding questions, discussions you would like to have, I have time, so that's perfectly fine. I see some hands up still. I'm not sure if it's an old hand or a new hand of Ruth and Anthony. Maybe I hand over to Anthony now and then over to Ruth. Anthony?
Yes, thanks. This is a very short question because I'm afraid that I am going to have to dive into a next meeting now. But it seems to me that for a next conversation, a big question is what do we do about where the gaps are in our data? There's a lot of talk today about what we do have on, and specifically around direct supply chains and the satellite mapping kind of at a landscape level. But how do we tie that into the practical applications of where the big gaps are, specifically in the indirect supply chain? That would really be my interest in a conversation in the next time.
That's I think an excellent suggestion. So thanks for that. We will definitely take that up. And I think we really all have to look at the gaps for sure. I mean, another element we also want to tackle to some degree is the ground data. And if we couldn't try to find a pre-competitive space for sharing ground data, so that would be another avenue we should look at. But indeed, also the indirect supply information is really, really critical. Maybe to Ruth and then to Felix.
Yeah, I just think it's been a really fascinating meeting, but I think somebody's raised already. What can we, what role and which organisation can really be this, perform this so important task of sharing information and really trying to get people to align, methodologies for this kind of work on using satellites to monitor forests. And I would have thought, there's a great opportunity here for somebody, like the European Union or another big, global organization to take up that role. And I really feel quite strongly, that the European Union is wanting to, as I understand it, create their own maps. But really, again, are we not just reinventing the wheel? Should it not be, national organizations that should be working to develop their maps, and then an organization such as the European Union could take on this important role of coordinating and getting nations to share And also there's, these regional organizations such as ECOWAS in West Africa that could take on this role and ensure that there's learning between countries. Paula mentioned this work that we hope is going to be funded, which is getting Ghana, the KNUST and the Forestry Commission to share their work in Nigeria. What a fantastic thing. This is what we need more of, is sharing of learning, not just between international institutions, but between countries on best practice, because that really helps with the ownership and sustainability. Thanks.
Excellent points, Ruth. Thanks so much for that. And there is Felix from the European Commission. So maybe he wanted to say something else, but he can now answer the question. So over to you.
Definitely, I would be delighted to speak for the Commission, but I'm strictly forbidden at the JRC to speak for them. No, but thanks a lot. It was really interesting to follow all this and also to listen to Ruth's last comment, which kind of has already answered or part of the things I wanted to say, and with which I totally agree. What I wanted to add maybe is, listening to all the presentation, I've heard a number of calls being made, or people calling for example, sharing information about technical standards or defining technical standards, which are kind of minimum standards for mapping and monitoring. I think this is really, really important, and those standards should be possibly open and transparent and available to all. I think there was also a strong call for sharing data in all directions, from the private organizations to the foundations, backwards, from the scientific to the public and to the. I think this is really clear, and Stefan, you have also made it clear that this is one of your objectives. So that is great. I was wondering a bit about, maybe there could be also an interesting communication aspects. Now, if we could in some way improve communication so that we pass similar messages, and also similar messages about what cannot be done. I mean, looking at all the presentations, everybody who presented the map was basically claiming that it has an 80% or over 80% accuracy, which I think is fantastic. I mean, from a technical point, and I also have a remote sensing background, so I know that this is a good result. But still, I mean, we have to be really honest about what this cannot be used for. With 80% accuracy at the national level, this is not a map to look at single plots or to do any tracking or tracing. Or so the next point, I mean, traceability. Traceability is, I mean, is one of the great objectives, and I think we have seen a lot of progress in this. And I mean, just the trace presentation is illuminating. But this is also something where the contribution of remote sensing, I think, is limited. It can contribute, but Earth observation is not what will allow us to do traceability of cocoa. And I think this has to be communicated clearly. And I cannot speak for the Commission, but I'm trying to speak to them to say, I mean, to make some of these messages clear, that this should not be, it should not be understood that with Earth observation we we solve the traceability problems of cocoa, or we make a huge change to that. That is all. Okay, one very last point. I'm sorry, it's getting a bit long. I see also, I've seen many people calling for the ownership of it, and this is also really crucial, the national ownership. But the problem there is, it would be easy if it were functioning governments. Don't quote me on that, but it is difficult. It's not sufficient to have one ministry endorsing something. It doesn't work like that. So it needs, I think, just to remember, and many of you are active in that, but it needs a dialogue. It needs an incredible process. And I totally agree with what was said by Ruud, and I think I will also report back as much as I can do to the Commission. It needs all parties, and especially large institutions, to try to steer, I mean, to stimulate and to steer that dialogue, because it's not endorsement by a ministry which is sufficient for anything. Thanks. Back to you, Stefan. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Felix, for making those important points. Indeed, that was repeatedly stressed, that endorsement is not sufficient, and it really needs to go towards operation and its operationalization. and follow up on the ground on what can be done. So this is an important outcome of this very interesting conversation we are having here. Over to you, Ethel. You want to say some final words?
Sure. I was going to say that I could not agree more with what many people have said about coordination and sharing to build greater strengths amongst each other around best practice and a common understanding of key definitions and the best methodologies. But I was going to suggest that in the absence of true, timely, effective leadership by the United Nations or the Cocoa and Forest Initiative or the World Cocoa Foundation or any other institution that has been suggested here, I believe all of us who are experts in cocoa mapping and land use mapping in countries that are the dominant cocoa producers and mapping of deforestation and combining the mapping of deforestation in cocoa and supply chain traceability work, that all of us can lean in together to be as synergistic and as open with one another as possible. And if we build a shared community of practice with trust and mutual engagement and regular updates and strong communication amongst ourselves, I think it will make it easier for an institution like the UN to come in and play its full role of true effective leadership. So if we can create all the right conditions by stepping up ourselves right now and going forward, I think that's an incredibly important building block to exactly what Felix and Ruth and others have alluded to, this need to break free from the silos and to be stronger together and better together. I believe we can do that.
Thanks, Ethel. I have nothing to add there. That were brilliant, nice words, and maybe I leave you with that nice words of Ethel, that we all share and work together more. I think it's much more needed than ever in those times. With that, I would like to close this workshop and thank everybody for your very active participation. And we want to continue the conversation as said. So we will be in touch. We'll take that up. And I think it's an important group we are having, and we can share many experiences. So thanks everybody again, and have a good day. Bye.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for all of your chairing efforts, Stefan and Johannes, for all your organizing of this. And we really appreciate it.
And you too, Ethel. Thank you very much, Ethel, for helping as well. Yeah, thanks. Cheers. Bye-bye.